I am going to show you some of my favorite layouts from various magazines published in 2024. And believe me, you have to see these. They are so good and we can learn so much by analyzing them. This layout actually reminds me of a carousel where you have to swipe to the right to see what's next, and it reveals an interesting part of the composition. Obviously, in this case, that's the finger on the right. But also there is a nice repetition going on here. On both sides of the spread, we have a little bit of the skin showing. Here we have the toes, and then here we have the fingers in the same location. Of course, we can also see the head a bit, but this repetition I really like. And I also love the way this finger is pointing at the full stop in the heading. That's a great visual connection between the text and the image. And in general, I just love this massive amount of negative space created here in the middle, which would normally lead to a very calming and peaceful composition. But this is contrasted with the font that is used on the heading. And that's actually a very smart choice for a typeface with these very sharp and angled lines, because although we see a person in a bathtub, the whole article is about the fact that even a bath is not helping to feel less stressed. Also, I just love the color palette. This almost monotone duck egg or mint green works so well in combination with the white of the text and the foam in the bathtub. Here is another great example of simplicity used in a layout. So this is from New Scientist, and this article is about reanimating or reviving brains and other organs. And immediately what we can see here on the top, this chart or graph is showing a flat line, and then it's coming back to life at the end. And I love how this detail here is so close to the edge of the page. So literally we are seeing all the way on the last 10% of the spread, the actual action. And normally what we would say on a layout like this, or in any layout to be honest, is not to place things that are important too close to the far right, because our eyes immediately are attracted to more things on the left side. So this is more of the area where you would like people to focus, or at least to grab their attention, while here the action is focused on the very end of the spread on the right side. So similarly to the previous example with the bathtub, another unorthodox crop of the image, here we get this extreme push to the very edge of the spread where the action is happening. And this is a great example of how extremes can work so well in visual communication. So whether it's pushing the scale of something and making it extremely large or small, or whether the placement of the interest being so close to the edge of the spread. I also love this layout from Huck magazine. There's a lot of quirky things here that are unusual. And of course, this is something that's used in other magazines as well, but I like how it goes against the conventions. Like this text frame here obviously feels uncomfortable because the text is so close to the edges, but that's the intention. So if you just zoom a little bit closer, you can see it better. Then we have the main image, the portrait, which is completely blurred, so we can't actually see the person, even though it's an actual real person that this article is about. But beyond the artistic choice of having motion blur featured, it actually ties in really nicely with the story that's been told here. So breaking rules and going against conventions makes sense if there is an intention behind it. If there is just meaningless chaos in a layout, that usually doesn't work as well. I always love when the main title or heading of an article interacts with the image within the spread. And this is a great example where all the characters are connected to the text. And they've done a really good job at using this very simple but colorful and vibrant typography that goes so well with these rendered characters from the Pixar movie Inside Out 2. I especially like how the main character Joy is holding up this memory orb, which is actually interacting with the text behind it. And additionally, I also like how anxiety disappears behind this character, the S on the right side. Also notice that we have diagonal lines in the composition. So we have 3 characters on the top and then we have these 6 characters at the bottom. But both of these rows of characters are aligned on these diagonal lines and they are almost parallel to each other. This helps to establish rhythm, but also it creates these leading lines that guide our eyes from the left to the right side of the spread. And whoa, what a powerful spread this is from Men's Health magazine. I love the juxtaposition or contradiction that we see here. So obviously the title is Are We Losing Our Appetite for Veganism? And then we actually see vegan food, but displayed as if this is a big chunk of meat. And the tomato sauce almost looks like blood. So it really feels so contradicting. It feels like a very gory image, but then you realize that you are actually looking at vegetables. So this layout demonstrates it so well that the shock factor is a great way to grab people's attention and to have them stick to a spread for a little bit longer and potentially make them more interested in reading the article. And of course, that is the main goal of a featured article's cover spread. Since we talked about leading lines in the previous spread, I also want to mention here we have many of these, the bone being probably the most prominent, but then also these little splats that we can see here throughout the page, they all guide our eyes to the center of the page. So many of these lines are present here and they all really help us to focus to the central part of the page, which of course is the main composition. Compared to some of the more minimalist and simple layouts that we've seen before, here is a more complex one featuring an infographic. And the reason I included this specific layout from Wired magazine is because I am extremely impressed how much information they managed to pack on this layout without making it overwhelming. Of course, it will take some time to fully appreciate all the details here, but at first glance, you will see that it looks like a stadium or the top view of a stadium. And that is because this article is about Olympic host cities and how much it costs to host Olympic Games. So first up, we have a little key here at the bottom. Yellow represents summer and this greenish, bluish or turquoise color represents the Winter Olympics. So we can already see that immediately the Winter Olympics definitely cost more than Summer Olympics. The circles are much bigger. And then here on the top left, we can see that there's these 2 lines. The white one is showing the estimated costs, while the black line is showing the actual costs. So the estimated costs are showing in these on the outer ring. And it's a very smart setup because it's easy to compare the 2 next to each other. Now, if we zoom even further, we can see the names of the host cities on these lines. We can also see the dates when they hosted the Olympics. And these little circles, the white and black circles, actually represent of how many competing bids were there each time, meaning how many host cities were bidding to host the Olympics that year. So wherever we see a lot of circles, that means there were lots of competing bids running that year. But probably the most important information is in these little boxes where we can see how much the actual cost of running the Olympic Games ran over the estimations. But even without reading those percentages, just simply by looking at the size difference between the circles on the outside and the inside, we sort of get an idea of which host cities ended up paying a lot more than what they expected. Now, returning back to the full view of this article, just one last thing I wanted to mention is that when you have a large infographic like this that has to show so much information, it is surprising that they still manage to fit a fair amount of text here at the bottom. Although it feels a little bit of a squeeze, but it still has a nicely separated column layout with the heading also being visible here on the left, taking up 2 column spaces. And even though this layout is packed with information, we still get some negative space throughout the spread. And also, it's worth mentioning, it's very smart the way they avoided putting any important information in the creep, in the center part where the magazine is going to fold. This video is sponsored by Skillshare, where you can actually find many of my in-depth graphic design and illustration courses. My latest course covers an entire professional magazine article project using Adobe InDesign. You can learn how to define and structure every key component of a magazine article, like headings, subheadings, text, bylines, body copy, and so much more. By the end of this class, you will have a stunning design for your portfolio and the skills to tackle any editorial project with confidence. The best thing is that you can now get access to this course for free. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. And to make it clear, this trial will give you access to all of the courses on their platform, not just mine. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives with thousands of classes led by industry experts across illustration, design, AI and innovation, productivity, and more. Skillshare can help you to take your career, skills, hobbies, passions, or side hustles to the next level. Right now, I am taking Jacob Collier's new course called Music Fundamentals, Explore and Create Your Unique Sound. I'm a huge fan of his, and composing and playing music has been a passion of mine since my childhood. And it's something I still love to do in my free time. Jacob's course is so inspiring and he shares so much valuable knowledge. It's a real treat for anyone interested in making music. I am also extremely proud to mention that I was recently selected into Skillshare's Top Teacher program, which inspires me to make even more educational content and share my experience with you. But now, let's check out some more of these amazing magazine layouts. Moving on, we have a lovely spread from Variety magazine about 4-year-olds going to cinema and their first experience with movies in cinemas. This is a great example of showing the power of impactful editorial illustrations and how nicely the textured feel of the line work from the illustration carries over to the typography. I also love the fact how everything on this spread is done in this handwritten format, yet still everything is easy to read. The lesson here really is that you should never be overindulgent in using fancy script fonts without keeping your text functional. So obviously readability, legibility, these are the most important things for a magazine article, especially of course for the body copy, but it applies also on all the elements on a cover spread too. Now here's a crazy, busy, maximalist layout from Stylist Magazine about rom-coms, and I love how they achieve this collage look that's really bringing back that 90s vibe. And although it is very subtle, but what really sells this to work as a real collage is how we can see the halftone patterns that you would normally get when you see a cheaper print in a magazine and then you cut that out. So that's something that most likely has been digitally recreated here and applied as an overlay throughout the whole composition, yet this really helps to achieve that certain look. Now, although I'm not a huge fan of rom-com movies, I still really appreciate this layout. I feel like they've done a terrific job in packing so much into one spread. As a harsh contrast to the previous cheerful layout, here we have a much more serious composition about an equally serious issue, flooding around the world. So this is from Marie Claire UK magazine. And the main thing I love here is this repetition of having two couples from two completely different parts of the world facing the same problem. And it creates this beautiful symmetrical composition. It's also worth mentioning that as an editorial designer, you have to be very good at finding the best placement for text on top of images without creating a box around it. And in this case, in both images, they found a great placement for the text, so we can still easily read it without making these texts too powerful and taking away the spotlight from the people in the photographs. Most of the time, as an editorial designer, you have to play this balancing act between imagery and typography, and this is a beautiful example of when it works well. Another awesome layout from Wired magazine. I love the use of grit here and also these very vivid colors contrasted with the black and white typography and additional pattern details. It's worth mentioning small details like parts of letters disappearing, half of the O is hidden away, or this part here is also overlaid by the shape in front of it. And also how these words, Europe's and hottest, are divided into two lines. And in this particular case, how the two lines are completely snapped to each other. And all of these solutions that I'm highlighting here are actually reducing the readability of the text. But since this is the main title of the article and the text is really big, it turns into more of a little challenge or game that the readers will have to solve to be able to get through this page. I'm a big fan of the layouts that they do in Edge magazine, which is about computer games. And this particular spread really stood out to me because there's a lot of clever solutions here. At first, you might feel like it's a bit lazy to have the logo from the actual game being so big and featured not only on the left side, but then also again on the right side here. But to fully understand the thinking behind this layout, we have to take a look at the additional spreads. So the second spread is this, and the third one, and the fourth one, and I think that's the last one there. So you probably noticed that on each of these pages, we have these elements from the logo showing up and dividing the text into two columns. So jumping back to the first spread, we can see how that element from the logo is carried on and used throughout the whole article. And the reason why I wanted to feature this is just to emphasize how important it is throughout an article to have an overarching, consistent element or style that brings the whole article together. Especially for featured articles, the editorial designer's task is to find a solution that will be able to tie things together. And in this case, I think they've done a brilliant job at that. And last but not least, it's also worth mentioning how the first three words of the title of the article is so faint compared to the last word, future. But this way, it really gets a massive emphasis. This spread is from the Conde Nast Traveler magazine, and I just adore the simplicity of it. And there's a lot of negative space here. However, there's a beautiful texture within that space, formed by the snow and ice on the Marmolada Glacier in Italy. And the curves in the snow that were created by the wind are perfectly recreated by the skier going down the slope. We've already seen other examples of repetition being used, but here it's just a masterclass of that. And it's also worth mentioning how both the skier and the first character of the text is aligned according to the rule of thirds. Now, there's also a couple of additional layouts that I found really strong and I included in the Milanote board, but I'm not going to go into analyzing them because I already covered all the important reasons in the previous examples that I would just keep repeating here. But if you want to take a closer look at them and also check out the entire magazine, you can go back to the Milanote board, for which the link is in the description below. Thanks a lot for watching and joining me. I hope you had fun and you learned a couple of useful techniques here. Let me know in the comment section below what you thought of these designs, or if there is any specific area that you would like me to cover in the next video. I am planning to do more of these best of 2024 videos. I already have a couple of other ones lined up, so keep an eye out for those, and if you don't want to miss them, make sure to subscribe and also hit the bell icon. Also, since this is most likely going to be the last video for our channel this year, I just wanted to say happy holidays, have a creative new year, and I will see you in the next one.